Okay. Hey, Steve. I am just pondering some things, and uh, thought I would uh, share with you some of the stuff I'm looking at. This is a little far afield from some of the stuff we've been discussing, but it's philosophy, so fun stuff. Um, So I'm thinking about like the first conversation we had where we talked about the different kinds of ways of thinking about philosophy, right? We talk about philosophy itself and then philosophies in the plural, in which, we talk, what we're more or less referring to as schools of thought, right? So schools of thought being what they are particular um, worldviews, or it maybe more specifically, because that's kind of a general term, uh, but more specifically, um, they are particular takes or conclusions or points of view given certain themes, right? So the question of evil, the question of immortality of the soul, the question of um, I don't know, the meaning of meaning, these kinds of different kinds of basic philosophical questions do have their sort of scholarly responses, right? And so people can talk about schools of thought. And I was just thinking about Kant in particular because I was thinking about how I regard the aesthetical mind as a component in the faculty of judgment. And what that means is, in basic terms, is that you have an aspect of the senses which, of course, judges on a certain level, the aesthetical level. It gives a judgment regarding empirical objects or abstract objects. So the idea of evil itself has an aesthetical quality to it. The experience of beauty and nature has an aesthetical quality to it, and so that shows you that the mind is doing aesthetical work, right? It's casting judgments, as it were, over nature and over the experiences of nature, and so in so doing, it is expressing the faculty of judgment through the aesthetical conduit, right? There's also the ethical conduit, the religious conduit. These are considered to be different kinds of the pure conduit, which, well, but that's actually something altogether different. We're talking about pure reason, because that's actually the faculty of judgment considered without the empirical faculties or the empirical conduits, right? So when you're trying to understand the critique of pure reason, the idea there is to, of course, talk about what pure reason can and cannot accomplish on its own, so that you are left with limits on the work of philosophy, or these kinds of faculties of judgment, faculties of pure reason, practical reason, and aesthetical reason. And so, that's the sort of those are Kantian sort of theories of this faculty and how these things are related. And of course, I think about aesthetics a lot, just due to being an artist, but also as a philosopher, I think a lot about the meaning of aesthetics, and what it can mean for something to be beautiful, something to be ugly or horrifying, or just to have something looks funny, something things have a sort of emotional, a raw emotional feel to them, and so that initial experience, the aesthetical judgment, then has to be refined and sort of filtered through the ethical judgment. And this is kind of a Kantian view of this whole faculty of judgment and how it works. And I think he's kind of building on Plato's ideas of like pure reason being like the noumena, and the sort of the soul being tripartite, or being made of like a spirit of reason, a spirit of passions, and a spirit of appetites, or sort of vegetative growth, really. But appetites just sort of refers to that. So, anyways, but that's often the way that philosophy does things. Is it if you look at philosophy broadly as a kind of a historical process, as a historical procedure, well, what you'll see is that you'll have these schools of thought on these different topics, like how do we know something? I've mentioned these things, but anyways, and then you'll have specific schools who will kind of respond to each other, critique each other, and in the process kind of like move towards a better understanding of things. And I think professional philosophers will understand that, a particular view, such as like the Kantian view of beauty or the Kantian view of justice, is a waypoint and not a destination. But it may still, nevertheless, be reasonably regarded as one's own viewpoint. And so within certain boundaries, as a professional philosopher, somebody who's doing philosophy for a living. So you have this important feature of what we regard a worldview or a viewpoint is. So if I call myself a Kantian, what I'm saying in that particular case, being a professional philosopher and doing philosophy, is if I'm a Kantian with respect to a particular issue, what I'm saying is that I'm at this waypoint in my own sort of philosophical progress. It's the best idea or best explanation for X, Y, and Z that I've come across, right? If I belong to school X, if I belong to the idealist or the materialist or the empiricist or the nihilist or the optimist or the hedonist or any of the skeptics or whatever school of thought I belong to, what I'm in fact really saying as a professional philosopher, as somebody who's continuing to read more and more philosophy and continuing to become better acquainted with better ways of viewing, regarding, and talking about things, then I am a Kantian as a waypoint towards something that may be a greater destination. Now, the other point is that it's probably okay if you do have students who are not philosophers and who don't plan to become philosophers, then to teach them these views as maybe destinations, because they themselves are capable of becoming stagnated in these things. I don't know if I want to promote that, but when as a philosopher, if I think about my students and what my students might do with the philosophy that they've been given over the course of a lifetime, if they don't continue to enrich themselves, then what I'm imagining that is going on there is that they have come to a waypoint and they just decided to settle. Right, they've settled down there. They've made that their home. So that becomes more than a waypoint for them. It becomes a viewpoint, and it becomes a viewpoint precisely in light of the fact that they're not really progressing beyond that view of things, and they may never progress beyond that view of things. Now, that's not to say that this is not doomsday. This is not pessimism. We're wearing different hats here, right? So if we want to imagine, well, this may mean some will in this lifetime continue to make progress just simply because the force of their experiences continue them to rethink their ideas. And they may eventually come to a point where they were like, well, that stupid philosopher, he had that viewpoint, and clearly that's wrong. But that's not precisely the philosophical point of view if you're a professional philosopher who just says, well, I found a better explanation. And so that's, I've moved on from that view. And so thinking about life in that progressive way, thinking about life as a kind of a series or a procedure of progressive understandings of things. This is Soren Kierkegaard's view of things, right? He talks about this very. I love this quote. This is definitely one of my favorite maxims. This is worthy of a tattoo. Life is to be lived forward, but it is to be understood backwards. And if I can ever find the original, I think he's Danish manuscript, I'll have to get that tattooed. But that's the nature of philosophy itself, and that's one of the reasons why it's really kind of humbling to be a philosopher, because you get to this point where you recognize you're like, well, I don't know everything, and I probably, a lot of the time I'm only in a place of, intuition and half finished questions or half finished quests to answer questions. And so it's important and valuable to recognize that, to be humbled by it, and to, of course, take the quest seriously and to go on, continue to read, continue to enrich yourself as a thinker, as a philosopher, and then always to kind of but to always to just cite your sources, right? So you say I'm a Kantian is just for a philosopher. It's to say this is as good as I've seen it so far, but there may be other better philosophers out there with better ideas, who are more comprehensive, more coate. Their philosophy hangs together very tightly and hangs together with the facts very tightly. That tightening the screws on reality and understanding, and of course, the maturation of wisdom to recognize the right approach and to pursue it with energy and vigor, and to not despair when it doesn't always provide the results that you were looking for. But to always recognize, that with that humility, that we're still a young race. Theoretically, we could live 10 million more years. There's no reason why humans have to go away, but it exacts a toll on the universe itself in terms of um, the life biomes, the biomes of this world or any other, really. Anyways, there's some fun stuff. The stuff that's going on with the moon now. It just got me all sorts of interesting questions I'm asking. Anyways, yeah. So so that was all. That was all. I just wanted to talk about the difference between, viewing a school of thought as a waypoint versus viewing it as a destination. That was kind of the big point I was trying to make. So I feel like I made that fairly well. Let me know if there's any questions something you don't understand, or you want me to go back over. I'll be happy to go dive into some other stuff. But did we talk about, just another question, did we talk about Dasman? Because I'm thinking, I don't remember if we did. I don't remember if we covered Dasman and the way one does things and authenticity, if we ever got into that. It's definitely a conversation worth having. Sorry we didn't get to have it this time. But yeah, we'll be back next Friday, I guess. All right, this is Ben signing off.